Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing your insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide practical perspectives on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. And before we dive in, I'm thrilled to announce that my latest book, Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with actionable advice for growing a successful law firm. Be sure to grab your copy today. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive tips and resources. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we love your reviews. They help us reach more attorneys like you who are striving to build the practice of their dreams. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hi, everyone. Excited to have you on our next episode of Power Up Your Practice. Again, my name is Ruby Powers, your host. And we have today Morgan Maguire. He's the co-founder and CEO of Lex Select, a legal tech company focused on making life easier for legal professionals. Well, sign me up. That sounds great. Legal professionals waste hundreds of hours a year performing low-value administrative tasks, including copying, pasting text from PDFs, and manually generating citations. And Lex Select is solving this problem by using AI to automatically generate structured documents so they can text and citations are seamlessly generated and integrated into working documents. And the solution significantly enhances the productivity of legal professionals, enables them to focus on high value work that they love to do. That sounds exciting. But today we're going to be talking about a little bit about Lex Select, but a lot about just AI and efficiency in just the ever evolving space that we are in as legal professionals. So Morgan, welcome to the show.
Ruby, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we met at ABA Tech Show. I think that might have been the first time, just this year in March 2025 in Chicago, I believe. And we did what I tell other people to do: make a connection and then follow up and have a conversation and see where that can go. And this is one of the things we're here having you on today's episode. So, well, tell us a little bit about what you think. There's a lot of talk about how lawyers are sort of afraid that AI might replace them, or like, I don't know, what's the future going to hold? We've seen a huge change the last few years. What's sort of your take on that?
Well, I see, obviously there's very fundamental change that is occurring with some of these new tools that are available. And there's no question that that's going to change the industry in fundamental ways. But I think there are people that are predicting, the replacement of lawyers, and I think that's a false narrative, in the sense that, first of all, when it comes to society and what the legal system represents, it's societal norms, and there needs to be human accountability to that. Humans need to be in the loop in terms of ensuring that those norms are following what we as human beings believe is to be just, and that cannot be automated through AI. So I think that's sort of a political standpoint that cannot occur. And then when you look at AI in terms of its integration into the legal profession generally, you're seeing a lot of experimentation that is occurring with these AI tools, but those that are actually truly being adopted are those that are integrating into existing workflows and the way lawyers work. So essentially giving them superpowers and augmenting their ability to do more and more volume and to add more value to their clients, as opposed to sort of replacing them entirely in the workflow. And so I think in terms of this technology and its long-term future and the success of it, it's going to be those opportunities where you can help a lawyer do more work and do higher value tasks or higher value strategic and advisory work, which is what, us as lawyers all went to law school for. We didn't go to law school to perform the administrative tasks. We wanted to provide high value strategic advice and advocacy to our clients, and these tools will further enable us to do that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that this conversation, this question keeps getting asked over the last few years, especially with the advent of more readily available AI. And we've sort of seen an evolution in the way people think, but there definitely is the need of the human component and where lawyers should best use their time. And I like this Jordan Furlong article he wrote a while about like the advocating, accompanying. Forgot what the third word was. That's eventually what we're going to aspect. Like that's what we're going to end up being doing a lot with our clients, and that's the best use of our time. And so that's what we should be looking towards. Um, and it's so funny, guys. We're saying the word human so much. I was just like, I was going to go visit. I had to go visit a detained client this weekend. Fun times, Fourth of July weekend, and I was talking to the clerk, the person on the phone at the detention facility. I was like, "So you mean you won't let me bring my phone in, and there's no phone inside, and I'm going to have to bring a human?" And I was just like, "It's yes, I had to bring a human in to help translate because I didn't speak the same language." But anyway, we seem to be having to differentiate between the AI and the humans. But what are some? Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Lex Select does, so we have a little bit more of a perspective in that, and then we'll.
Yeah, sure. So, essentially what we do is we help lawyers deal with all the problems created by PDFs and other types of unstructured data. So, you've probably experienced this problem yourself when you have a PDF document and you want to just copy and paste some text from your PDF into your Word document. When you do that, you might have a line break mid-sentence, or the styling doesn't match your Word document, and it creates all this administrative trouble of having to reformat that, or you have to generate a citation. And when we created Lex Select to solve that particular problem that was experienced by my co-founder, Scott Foster. And now that has evolved where we've created a document parsing engine where we essentially take these PDFs, we surface any text, and then we call what we call tokenize it, and then essentially embed within that token all of the context that exists across the document within that token, so that for every element of text across the document, you know exactly what line it's in, what paragraph it's in, what type of document it is, and all that other context that we can then use for various purposes. So we generate citations. And then just last week, actually released a chat bot that is, similar in some ways to other chatbots. You can summarize, search, generate chronologies of your documents, but it's all being fed by our structured data, which enables us to provide other features. For example, when you generate your output, it links you back to the actual source passages where that output was generated, so you can actually verify where that output came from to see if it's correct with a full citation. And I think going back to that trust element with AI tools generally, this is sort of the missing link where we can use these tools to summarize documents and do all kinds of things like that. But in order for us to really trust them and to, adopt them into our workflows, where, as you were just saying, you have a client who's being detained and their freedom is on the line, you have to be able to trust it. And that's why you need to have tools where you can verify those with the actual facts coming back to the documents themselves.
Honestly, we were preparing, and you're mentioning like how this is sort of a nice age for small and mid-sized firms to be able to compete with larger firms. And
Yep.
I think a lot about that from when I started my practice back in 2009. It was like the cloud was out for a little bit. There was the Great Recession. There was a lot of disrupt happening in big law. But it gave a chance for us little baby law firm owners to really have a chance to compete. We didn't have to have a huge library, law library to compete. We didn't have to have all these huge investments. In fact, we were limber, and now I think we're in a different. I think we're in a similar like entry point in a way for other law firm owners, where you can do a lot with so little, with a lot of the tools that are coming out. What's your take on that?
I think it's quite interesting because for a long time you saw within the legal industry generally like was consolidation. You had mergers that were occurring and firms were getting bigger and bigger at a certain level. And I think that made sense from like an economic standpoint because you had, economies of scale. So
Right.
you're pooling overhead resources, and that enables you to deploy your services more efficiently and improve your margins to a certain extent too. But now with these new tools, these new products, you can run a law firm in, say just 10 lawyers in this at the same scale that would be for 100 lawyers or more because of some of these products that are available. And so those those same sort of economies of scale don't really apply in the same way that they used to. And so that enables, those smaller firms to compete with the big ones in ways that wasn't possible just even a few years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree. When we were changing our case management software, I really didn't want to hire any new staff members because I wanted to see what could we do with more tech capabilities with less staff. Because I didn't want to just throw more staff, at an issue thinking, oh, we're busy, we're crazy, because sometimes people say they're busy, but they're really just being inefficient. And then some of these things can really reduce the time that we need to spend. The other thing I think a lot of times I said this before, like people brag about how many staff they have, but really the question is how productive and profitable you are, not how many bodies you employ. But anyway, and then the other thing is that I'm just intrigued by all these new programs like Lex Select, these other ones like drafting or email automation or all these programs because like they're in these like genres of let's say legal tech that or just case management or tech in general that we sort of didn't know existed or we needed. And now they're popping up. And so I'm consulting with law firm owners about these programs. Like I think if you haven't been going to a lot of trade shows, you haven't been listening to all these different webinars or podcasts or just out there, you might not even know some of these programs exist, but they literally could be saving you and your team hours and on hours on end. And really, I think we're in this space where it's sort of this AI revolution of like, how can we be the most efficient, have the greatest output with the least amount of effort, and but still have quality, trustworthy work and trust what we're doing. I think we're in a really, I think it's exciting. It's a little overwhelming, but it's a bit exciting
Yeah,
time.
it's exciting. It's overwhelming, but I understand, where other practitioners are coming from in the sense that I'm sure you can attest to this. Most lawyers that you talk to are at capacity. They don't have really extra time available. And so for them to go and explore and adopt new products, it's very difficult for them to integrate that into their day to day. And again, this comes back to the principle, I think, that those products that are being successful are those that are embedding themselves within the existing workflows of the lawyers, because that enables it. It's much easier for them to explore and adopt those into that workflow, because if you're trying to fundamentally change the way they work, you're going to get a lot of resistance. And
Yeah.
so I think that's the best way. If you're looking at tools, as a law firm owner, think about those things that can integrate into your workflows as opposed to like fundamentally altering everything and sort of blowing everything up and trying to rebuild it. I think that's much more difficult. I mean, obviously, if you're starting a new firm, you have those opportunities to explore those sort of more fundamental shifts in your workflows. But I think that's what's going to determine the success of those. And then, coming back to the idea of, uh, you know, what is going to be successful in terms of the industry as a whole. I think about this, coming back to the capacity component, and my co-founder, Jack Newton, he talks about this sometimes, where we all know that there is all this latent demand for legal services across, society. The clients that we serve are predominantly those of the fortunate, that can afford these services. And if we can change the way we deliver those services into a larger scale, where we're deploying these tools to help us deliver a larger volume of services to a larger volume of clients, but still providing a high level of value and service, that's where I think you can see the opportunities of expanding access to justice to those segments of society that don't currently access these services but would benefit from them. Everyone would benefit from immigration services if they could afford them. Everyone would benefit from understanding their rights and obligations when they're entering into some sort of legal agreement of some sort, but they just can't afford to get those services. And if we can make those services available at scale, but still providing that value with like a high level value of a service, I think that would benefit society as a whole.
I completely agree. And being my primary area of expertise, and there's usually a lot of individuals. the recent arrivals of immigrants don't have a lot of funds, depending on how they enter and everything, asylum seekers, let's just say. And so that's where I really get interested in like justice tech. I didn't even know that was a term until I learned it at ABA Tech Show this year, but and I find that so intriguing of like how we could leverage the technology to help better serve those. And yeah, I've heard Jack say that a lot about that latent market, and I've also heard others talk about like just how many people are not being represented, and how could we better package our services to help those in need. And I definitely, that's a constant conversation that I'm thinking about and having, and how to, and sort of also unbundle my services so that it can be at different tiers for people and more accessible for the consumer. Uh, so I think there's another interesting part about you were mentioning like cracking the code on unstructured data.
Mhm.
Um, so you raise legal workflows often involve unstructured data, making sometimes AI adoption harder. What do you think is a fix or way to make it better?
Yeah, so maybe just like to elaborate on like the problem a little bit. And so when we talk about unstructured data, we're talking about documents that like PDFs are a good example, where they might be coming from scanned copies of printed versions. So it's essentially just an image file, and there's no text embedded in that, or even if there is text, it's not structured in a way to understand where it exists on the page and how that influences its meaning. And if you use that type of data or those types of documents with some of these tools, like using it with ChatGPT and some of these other products, you'll find that the accuracy of those tools really plummets. So, you can use this. There was actually a report that came out, earlier this year, Val's legal AI report, and it studied, various different the prominent legal tools like CoCounsel and Vincent AI and so forth. And when they were applied to certain tasks where they were using, highly structured data, the accuracy level of those tools was extremely high, looking in the mid 90s to above. But then as soon as you started to use the same tools on unstructured data, the accuracy of those tools drops to less than 60%. And so that presents a fundamental problem because, as we all know, data isn't perfect. We all, within every workflow, there's going to be those odd documents here and there. They're going to be really messy where the client just decided to take a picture of the document and send it to you,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, produce something that's clean and structured. And then that will, make whatever workflow you've built that is using some sort of AI tool, it'll miss that. It means you can't trust it. And as a result of that, when you're thinking about deploying these systems into very critical workflows, particularly if that tool has to identify a critical piece of information that goes into a system of record that then gets translated into other workflows like filing documents and so forth that are extremely critical, you just can't adopt that tool
Mm-hmm.
because you can't trust it enough. But if you could take that data, process it, turn it into something structured, no matter what its source, and that become your data pipeline with which you then build your tools, all of a sudden, those tools become trustworthy enough that you can deploy them into those more critical workflows that you previously couldn't trust them to be adopted to.
Yeah, I think also what you were saying earlier about if you have the tools that can be added to the systems you already have, or the tools that you're already using. I think about how when we did a huge shift to changing our case management software, that was a huge adjust to the shock to the system. But
Mm-hmm.
then since then, we've been sort of adding little things to our existing systems, and that's been a lot easier to adapt from the human perspective. But then also just the tech side from the trial and error, and making sure that the more likely that my team is going to use it, as opposed to having to log into a lot of completely different programs. And then sometimes I give them tech stack options and then they forget about it because they have to go into a whole nother system and they get logged out and they forget about it. But yeah, I think that ease of use, trusting the system, a lot of that's just normal life skills, like concepts. Like I think about the book David Allen, Getting Things Done, and like if you trust the system, then you're gonna rely on it. But if you don't, you're going to just always be sort of second guessing and maybe not even wanting to leverage that program or that team member or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll give you like a sort of a concrete example in terms of like we're working with a firm. They're an insurance defense firm, and they are they have a lot of claim documents that come into them from insurance companies that they have to essentially manually parse through, and then integrate them into their practice management system. And they need to have pretty intensive manual parsing of that data because it needs to be correct, because then that data then goes into their practice management or case management solution, and then they use that for court filings. And in order for them to deploy more automation into that, they really need to make sure that that is 100% correct, because if they don't, that means that they could have some field that's incorrect. That means the court filing is incorrect and has these cascading effects across every workflow. And so, and that comes down to the fact that the documents that are sent to them are like scanned copies that are coming from who knows where and all these different file formats. And so if you can give that data structure before it goes into that workflow, you then have all these opportunities for automation that weren't possible before.
Yeah, I can see that. Just this whole thing is sort of a bit exhausting, especially I'm thinking about like the small law firm owner or, mid-sized firm owner and like assigning someone to stay in touch of the, do you hire like a CTO or, fractional one? And just like, how do you keep, I wish I just I didn't do my normal day job so I can go explore and experiment because it just, there's so many new tools out there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
with all the different things going out with AI, like how would you suggest, because you live in this space, like for people like me, running a firm, like how to sort of evaluate, or when do you need a tool, when do you not, or when are they just shiny objects, and when's the time to sort of take a look and see what's out there?
Well, I think, as you know, the legal industry is based on referrals. And I think going to conferences and meeting other people that are dealing with similar problems is I think critical. And then they all have products that they use, and you have products that you use, and you can exchange information about what is working and what isn't. I think is the best way to assess things and sort of peer review in that context. So if you aren't attending things like ABA Tech Show, I think those conferences like that are a great opportunity for you to understand how the industry is evolving in that sense. And then I think generally speaking, make sure that when you're looking at these tools, you and they're talking about particularly with AI technologies, educate yourself on how the technology works. How is it actually generating that output? Is it using a large language model? What large language model is it using? How is it using that data? And is it protected? And are you breaching any sort of professional obligations? Like those are all the sort of questions you need to ask, in the sense that um, you need to educate yourself on the technology itself and how it actually works, because that will allow you to be a much more informed buyer. Um, and there's a lot of literature out there you can get on that, and that's something that there's books to read about that. And so I recommend everyone try to you don't become an expert, but at the same time you have to have some minimal level of knowledge to understand that how these tools work. Because I think for example, you hear cases all the time now of people, of course, we've all heard the using fake cases generated by ChatGPT and that nature. And I think a lot of those are a byproduct of people not really understanding how these tools work and how the technology actually works. And I categorize that as more of like that's user error as opposed to a problem with the tool.
Mm.
Like if you don't understand how the tool works and you're using it, that's not the fault of the tool necessarily. That's the fault of the user not really understanding what it should be used for. And I think you should be taking some accountability for that.
Honestly, I'm so tired. I mean, I'm not saying to you, but like of everyone bringing up those first people who like had those hallucinated cases and then got in trouble. Like I'm so tired of hearing about those things, because like we moved on, people. Like let's learn, double check. There's better tools out there. Like, and the other thing is that's the thing. All these programs are improving. So if you checked out something at, an Avenger Hall, AV Tech Show, something like 1 year, it could be a completely different program or have so many different amazing things the following year. So it's everything is very dynamic. It's really crazy how fast things are moving. But I do agree with like you need to know how things work. And one of the things, even I feel like my firm is becoming like a testing ground for like little different baby like legal tech companies, and we're trying to see, do we like this, how, and then we're having conversations with the founders and talking about like, this, I think you should do this, that type of thing. But like truly finding out, does your team use it? Do they like it? How can it be better? Or don't just pay for stuff because you get the credit card bill, like, or the bill, and have your credit card on autopilot. Because you really we have to be auditing our tech stack way more than ever before. And there's whole new genres out there of services that we didn't know existed maybe a few years ago. And that's why it can seem overwhelming. I think before I could say, oh, just audit it once a year. And then it became like twice a year, then it became like every quarter. But it can be a lot of work. But I think the point of it is that once you have the right tech stack, you write the right programs, and you train your team, you know how to use it, you're using it as fully as possible, then you really can make yourself more competitive. You can save a lot of more time, and you can reach others who might otherwise not have been able to, you might not have been able to reach, maybe because of affordability or because you're unbundling services or what have you.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, and having those reoccurring audits, or just having education on how people sh- could use the tools too. Like, I think one thing that you look for when you're acquiring a particular product is, what sort of supports are available in order to train your team and make sure they're getting the most out of it. I think is really important because if you're investing in a particular piece of technology, you need to ensure that you and your team are getting the most out of it, or that you're not making sort of critical errors in the way you use it that could jeopardize your practice in some way.
Are you finding yourself overwhelmed with handling phone calls and spending endless hours on consultations that just don't qualify? Well, let me introduce you to Staffy Live, your ultimate solution for 24/7 live receptionist and intake services tailored specifically for law firms. Now, picture this: empathetic, truly bilingual specialists who understand the intricacies of client care and are experts at asking all the right questions to qualifying callers efficiently. Now that with Staffy Live, you'll feel like you have a trusted partner by your side, ensuring only qualified consultations make it on your calendar and providing valuable follow-ups when needed. As someone who's been using Staffy Live for my own law firm, I couldn't be happier. And I guess what Staffy Live is now offering, a generous 15-day free trial with no strings attached. You can head over to staffy.cc. That's stafi.cc and click Get Started. And don't forget to use the code RUBY, RUBY. Your future self will thank you. And one thing I was going to ask is like, what is a better? You were talking about the unstructured data, and is there another way that law firm owners can to be improving how their data is handled in the first place?
In terms of well, I mean, this is a part of our business that we're currently building out. Is talking to law firms about what sort of workflows they and pain points they're currently dealing with. As we know, many law firms have legacy data, that is in an unstructured file format. And we can help those firms essentially unblock or unlock that data and put it into something that they could use in a machine readable format for different types of use cases. So, I brought up that claims example, but others is, if you have, a client data that is in some sort of a database that is basically sitting there and you can't really do much with it, but you know that there's all this potential to unlock this knowledge repository they could use for various purposes. We're actively exploring those sort of opportunities with firms, and so I think when you're looking at your what you call, like I call them knowledge repositories, which is all this existing. That's a thing. Like law firms generally, there's so much knowledge that
Mm-hmm.
is in those firms in terms of all the past work that was performed.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's I find it amazing how uh, it is really incumbent. If you look at law firms generally, it was usually incumbent on some lawyer championing, for example, a precedent database, and having to go through and essentially manually parse through and create this database that people could access. But it required like a gargantuan manual effort to have to go through and create those databases for people to access. Whereas with some of these new technologies, I think that's where there's this opportunity, is that particularly in the unstructured data component, is we can unlock that for you, and then you can layer on your tools to query that. And just there's so much opportunity in that data that you can then leverage going forward.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in because one of the things about I was just thinking about my firm. We onboarded a new associate on Monday and this week, and like my firm's like, let's see, I guess 16 years old. So I was talking to somebody. I was like, I'm like the one constant between and we're gonna do this master, we call it the master mega case status review. Just we like to do it every once in a while to make sure everybody's accounted for and everybody's assigned and they're in the right database because we changed some databases over the years. And I was just like, I need to be there because I'm like sort of that constant, but I'm just one human. And but anyway, what I'm getting at is like, yes, there's like briefs and examples, and like when we see a crazy
Yeah,
case, I'm like, oh, remember that one case? And I
yeah,
won't remember their name, but I'll remember some crazy fact about it. And then I have to like do some digging in our system and I'll be like, and then like use that, start with that first and then go from there, And but yeah, it's exhausting being that, the human brain repository, but then above it all. But at the same time, then there's also there's the databases, but if it's not searchable, then how easy can your team find it and not have to reinvent the wheel?
yeah. And it's and I know that my wife is a practitioner in a larger firm, and it's larger firm. And I won't name things in that sense, but it's amazing how they still rely on certain sort of primitive methods of querying up documents, like looking at version numbers and things of that nature. And that's the only way to sort of identify things. And that seems, in today's age, that there must be a better way for us to consolidate and access that previous work in ways that so that you shouldn't ever need to reinvent the wheel. It should only be invented once, and then that knowledge should then be leveraged going forward. And it's surprising how often that is not done across firms. And I think that's where the real opportunity lies.
Yeah, I think one of our takeaways from today's session or podcast is don't be primitive. Often
Yeah,
do you, I mean,
and
are
just
you?
and just think about all the knowledge that is in your firm as an organization.
Yeah,
And if you had an opportunity to access that instantly, what what could you do? What opportunities would arise with that? And as the industry as a whole, that would introduce so many opportunities as well. So yeah, but I think
well,
that's
I think that's what some firms are doing is they're dumping all the stuff they have and they're either having an internal database or LLM where their staff members can ask questions, or they're doing maybe an outward facing one to prospective clients or maybe one to clients.
mhm,
And right, it's fascinating. We have, and even when I think about my law practice management hat and we're talking to law firm owners and they have so much data, like there's data everywhere. They just might not be collecting it and evaluating it and analyzing it. And why not we leverage that data to make ourselves more efficient and like we're saying, not reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
And
but the thing is too, I think like previous ways to do this required quite a bit of effort,
labor. Yes, yes.
in order to structure in a certain way to make it accessible. And what we're saying is that that isn't necessarily needed, anymore. You can kind of create the data in whatever form you want, and then use these technologies to access that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for Lex Select, what are some of the different before we start closing up, I have a few questions before we
Yeah,
finish up. But
yeah.
what are some of like the practice areas and maybe like use cases, a couple more that that for that can leverage Lex Select?
Well, I mean, for our end user product, which I described before, which has Lex Chat, which is this new chat bot. This is something that if you're in any type of practice where you have PDFs that are part of your workflow, and you're having to search, summarize, generate chronologies, particularly litigators, any type of litigation practice, you have that as part of your workflow. Those are the types of firms that be use that type of a product. And then with the document ingestion platform that we're building, this is basically any type of workflow where PDFs in particular are having to be parsed in some way to extract some sort of data from them to populate some sort of internal database. Our product will be able to automate that workflow.
Ah, that's awesome. Document, you said document ingestion.
Yeah. So basically, like, you have documents coming in from clients, you have
Yeah.
documents coming in from courts, whatever it might be. Those usually are parsed in some form and then used to populate fields in databases, and we automate that.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's just a lot of information, different formats flying at us in all different directions.
Mhm.
Um, well, okay, so rapid questions towards the end, where
Sure.
we get to really know more about you. Um, what's your favorite board game or game?
Uh, Settlers of Catan.
Oh,
I
okay.
like Settlers. I find it's a fun game and it's strategic. You can usually have a game within a few hours. It doesn't go on for days or anything of that nature. So I like that one.
Do you have like, yeah, there's like different types.
The expansion packs can get a little bit crazy. I just like the normal one. That's yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we haven't played this one in a while, but yeah, I like that one's fun. Like wool and wood and I don't know, brick or something. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
your resources that you got to collect. Yeah.
what's your superpower?
My superpower is I'm an internal optimist. I think that particularly running a startup, you have to be that to a certain extent. You have to be crazy to think that you can build a company. But I generally think that I'm optimistic about the legal profession and where it's going, despite all these disruptions in technology. I'm optimistic about technology, even though I think we have to be conscious of the risks. But I think I'm just a very optimistic person generally.
Well, that's awesome. I think you do need to be that, and especially in the entrepreneurial space. And that's that's good that you have that superpower. Would you can say is a habit that's contributed to your success?
Uh, I'm I'm good at maintaining routines, and I'm fairly disciplined, particularly when it comes to exercise and making sure that I take care of myself and that I'm in good physical form so that I can perform at a high level professionally and personally. And I think if that helps me a lot.
Yeah, that is really critical. I think sometimes in our journey we might start sacrificing our body or self because we're like working so much or we're stressed out or something, and then but then we realize that we won't be our optimal peak
Although when I'm
performance.
getting up at 5 in the morning to go for a run, sometimes I'm not sure if that's maybe compromising things on the other end of the spectrum too. But
But
yeah,
then it just means you have to go to bed earlier and like just
yes, yeah,
your whole day. Yeah, there's this new Pilates instructor, and he like kicks our butt. And I mean, today I was like, we were doing something called jackknife and candlestick, and I was just like, It took me a little while to get back to my car, back to my house afterwards, and we'll see how I feel later tonight. But I was proud of myself to be able to do those moves. I was like, yes. Um, anyway, I know that makes me a better lawyer, boss, mom, wife, all that good stuff afterwards. So by taking care of myself. Okay, so what's a favorite book or podcast or resource that you're just like, oh my gosh, I need to tell everybody about it?
Yeah. So in terms of podcast, one that I really enjoy is Hard Fork. It's
Oh,
hosted by Kevin Roos and Casey Newton.
okay.
It's pretty widely known. It's a New York Times podcast, and it's not like a legal focused one, but it's focused on technology and sort of what's happening within the industry, and it's funny, and yeah, I enjoy that one. And then in terms of books, I'm reading a good one right now. It's You Dreamed of Empires by Alvaro and Enrique. It's a novel. It's about when Cortez met Montezuma, and I'm only a little way into it, but I'm really enjoying that. And I do like nonfiction, but at the same time, fiction books I think are important to not just to escape, but to get good literature and writing, which is an important part of society as a whole. So I like to do that when I can.
Yeah, I don't really read fiction, but I love it when people suggest them sometimes. A hallucinatory, revelatory colonial revenge story. That's a mouthful.
Yes, it is. There's a lot going on in the book, but I also like historical fiction too. That's really my
Okay.
jam. I have a history undergraduate degree, so
Oh,
anything that's contextualized in a historical fact, I put in quotation marks. I really enjoy.
Oh, that's awesome. I was actually in Mexico City recently at the castle and everything. So and I didn't get to the pyramids, but I was there a long time ago. But it reminded me of a lot of history that I that just shaped the Americas and in Mexico. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, it's been great, having this discussion. I know there's so much to cover, but I like the optimism. I love the way to look at how things are changing and just how even like Lex Select is a program that could help create more of that way to save time and efficiency with all the the data and all the things that us law firm owners and legal professionals are working through. And I think just a healthy, optimistic approach to like how to look at a lot of the tech that's coming our way, and not to get overwhelmed, but to just think what's a way that we could integrate something in what we're already doing to make ourselves more efficient, and be able to help reach those in need and those who could use our services. So Morgan, how can people find you and stay connected?
Yeah, so I mean, the easiest way is to go to LinkedIn, Morgan Maguire at Lex Select. You can email me too, Morgan at lexselect.io. And of course, go to our website, lexselect.io. We do have a self-serve free product that you can go try. And as I just said, we just released Lex Chat, which is a new, it's not just a chat bot, it's way beyond the existing tools we use. So you can go use that there. And yeah, Ruby, it was a real pleasure. I think this is a great podcast. I think in the sense that helping lawyers, those that are particularly that are running firms, giving them those tools is critical to this next generation of practitioners, because we have to be not just lawyers, but we have to be business owners, and we have to be thinking about how we can run our firms as a business, and not just thinking about the practice itself, because it's fundamental to everyone to have those skills going forward.
Definitely agree. Well, thanks for joining us, Morgan. That was great to cover all these topics, and thanks everyone for joining us today on the latest episode of Power Up Your Practice. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe wherever you can listen to podcasts. And definitely tell friends and other colleagues about our podcast. We also have the school community, the Power Hub, and also the book Power Up Your Practice is available in the Kindle format and paper on Amazon. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management Podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, tell someone else about us, and we'd love to get this podcast podcast shared with others to reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive content, tips, and updates straight to your inbox. And exciting news, our book, The Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with strategies, 25 chapters, to help you elevate your practice and achieve your goals. So join us next week as we dive into more advice and insight on law practice management. We'll see you next time.